Representative Frank Hornstein of Minnesota wondered what it would be like if he were to live on minimum wage. So, just so you know, minimum wage in Minnesota is about $7.25, which is of course, the federal minimum wage. And so Representative Hornstein decided to find out what it was like living on that wage by doing something called the Minimum Wage Challenge for at least a week. Now, Hornstein isn't alone. There's a total of 5 representatives that took this challenge, or are taking this challenge now, in order to push for a minimum wage increase to about $9.50 an hour. Now, representatives, get this, representatives have about $35 to spend on food for the entire week. Representative Shannon Savick, who was taking this challenge, said, "I think I'm doing well with the food budget, mostly by eating a little less and essentially skipping breakfast." Now, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You don't have a good breakfast, you're kind of fucked for the rest of the day. At least most people are. Her lunch for 2 days consisted of a cup of soup and a little bit of milk. Not exactly the greatest lunch either, especially since you just skipped breakfast. Way to go. Representative Hornstein adds that, quote, "Dinner was a bag of ramen noodles for under $1. After 1 day, I am realizing that living on this budget forces choices all the time." Now, part of this challenge is they also have to find somewhere to live for that week within their budget. The amount of money they'll be able to spend on a place is about $359 a month. That's $11.97 a night. Representative Karen Clark actually did find a place that was in her price range, but it was just a room in a house that she would have to share with 3 other guys. She said it would be very discouraging to live in shared housing. I would have to go back to my early days out of school. That's what I did when I got out of college. If I had children, I wouldn't be able to do it. Exactly. Now, rent and food are major challenges facing people on the minimum wage right now. In Minnesota, it takes 86 hours of full-time work per week to afford a 2-bedroom unit at fair market rent. In some places, like New York, it's about 126 hours of work per week on the minimum wage to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And like I said, that's lucky enough. That's if you're lucky enough to be able to get a full-time job at 40 hours a week. Representative Hornstein believes that every elected official should have to take this minimum wage challenge. Now, I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about the challenge itself and to the reactions of some of these representatives that have taken it. Do you think it's opened some eyes?
Yeah, so the first thing I thought was $35 a week for food, and I realized that I've actually done that a couple of times just being broke and bought food for, of course, I bought over 2 weeks for like under $70. So that is doable. It's not great by any stretch, right? But if you're half Puerto Rican like me, just roll with the rice and beans. They will get you through the long days and the long nights. But yeah, it's refreshing to see politicians do this. We've seen a little bit of this with the food stamp challenge, and like it's nice to see them do this, even though I don't agree with the overall conclusion that they come to at the end. But it's nice for them to do this because we have like politicians that are so out of touch, like Hillary Clinton, who says she hasn't driven a car in over 20 years. Like it's nice that they kind of see how it is for normal human people. And what's also funny is that you brought up the New York rent, and to give you an idea of how expensive the New York rent is, I pay more in rent a year than Jordan paid for his house.
Wow. Jordan, speaking of Jordan.
Oh, to be fair, that was my house in Arkadelphia. My house in Little Rock was a little bit more expensive. I definitely appreciate this from an empathy standpoint. You know, like we as human beings, especially people who are writing laws that affect that affect the laws of people everywhere. Like we don't have a representative government if they don't truly represent the population. And that doesn't just mean having, you know, a certain amount of women for a certain amount of women population and having certain minorities. Those things are all important. But we need to have people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different education backgrounds. I think that's one of Neil deGrasse Tyson's kind of big quotes he's famous for. You know, you look at members of Congress and it's like business degree, business degree, business degree, law degree, law degree. Where are the scientists? Where are the engineers? Where are the teachers? You know, where are your social workers? Where you know, where are all the people that? Where are your farmers? Where are your factory workers? The people that actually represent the population. So I like this challenge. You know, from that standpoint, because it I think better than what a lot of these people do. It teaches empathy, but at the same time, there's some trite aspects to it, because I feel like the people taking this challenge are the people who are already kind of sympathetic to this argument anyway, and they're just kind of doing it to, like, you know, prove their own point or whatever. Like no, like, real, like, fat cat guy who you would accuse of not caring about the poor is going to do this. This is going to be your quote-unquote bleeding heart liberals who really, at least from a legislative standpoint, don't have as much to learn from it, because these are positions, you know, all it's going to do is reinforce positions they're already advocating for. And then the other thing here, too, is, like, this particular example we looked at just kind of reinforces, like, it almost strengthens the conservative narrative. Whereas it's who was Representative Frank Hornstein, who, you know, took this challenge or whatever. This article that we're looking at here, this is from the Journal. They talk about, like, the first day he went to McDonald's or whatever. Well, like, that's one reason why poor people have a problem staying poor, apart from all the systematic things like a crappy minimum wage that we should raise. Again, I want to clarify my position while I'm playing devil's advocate here. At the same time, one reason is because in America we don't teach people how to manage money. You know, like all through our public school system. Like, I didn't take a personal finance class until I was in college, because I went to a liberal arts school where that was required.
To Jordan's point, like, one of the, like I know I was kind of, like, halfway joking about the big bag of rice, but a big bag of rice in my neighborhood is $8.99, and that will help feed you for like at least 3 weeks to a month. And a McDonald's meal is like $7.99, and that will feed you for an afternoon. Like, so I get his point that a lot of it is not managing, like, not a lot of it, but some of it is not managing your money well, and also it's just not having the time, because you eat fast food because it's quick and not necessarily because it's cheaper.
That's BS. It takes no more time to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich than it does to walk to McDonald's, stand in line to get McDonald's food. That, like, Americans, again, like, I'm not against raising the minimum wage. I'm just saying, whenever Republicans get up and they talk about personal responsibility and give their whole BS thing, like, they don't actually mean that, and they're no more responsible than liberals are. But at the same time, that doesn't mean there's not truth to what they're saying. Like, part of getting out of poverty is personal responsibility, and we don't teach that in America, partially because we don't have a unified economic model. Our economic model is consume, 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 spend, spend, spend. Like, we're not all working towards a tangible goal like a lot of countries are. There's no idea of, you know, like, let's become the leading solar power country in the world, or let's become a leading manufacturer of something. It's just consume, consume, consume. And so, like, the thing that drives our economy is the same thing that keeps the poor poor, and it's overconsumption. Like, it's a really, really frustrating thing.
There are things that poor people do to keep themselves poor, right? That you could help them with. Like, there's certain suggestions, but, like, it's just, like, to get back to the original point, we all know that it's difficult and probably impossible to live on one minimum wage salary. Like, we get that. It's just, and, like, it's nice that these politicians do that. Like, they did the challenge, but they're not even doing it. Like, to me, like, your average, like, person who is really living this way, like, is smarter about how they spend their money than the politicians were. Like, I know when my family is broke, we eat a lot of pancakes. All right, because
I had pancakes for supper tonight because we've got a ton of pancakes frozen in the freezer because pancake mix is cheap.
Well, I've done that.
You eat a lot of pancakes, a lot of rice, a lot of beans, and I eat that stuff anyway. Like even if my family's doing better, I eat that stuff anyway because that's just like a cultural thing. A lot of rice, a lot of beans.
Because you're Puerto Rican, fool.
Yeah, I know, but we
and we eat a ton of rice here because my family is in the agriculture business and we're in the rice producing state.
But there are ways like and stuff like that. But that's not the point. The point is, does this convince people who don't think the minimum wage should be raised that it should be raised?
I don't know, man. It seems a lot like poverty tourism to me. Like it's 1 week, like if this challenge was like go a month or a quarter, then you would change some folks' minds.
See, that's what I wanted to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up, Jordan. I think it should be a requirement that you spend at least a month on the food stamp on the minimum wage challenge. You should do like what was it, Morgan Spurlock or is it Gene Spurlock?
The 30-day guy. Yeah,
Morgan Spurlock. Yeah. Yep, he did that for however long, and made a documentary about it. And I suggest everybody go and watch that. I'm not sure. I don't remember the name of it. Maybe you guys can help me out.
I think that was his show where he did the minimum wage. It's Morgan Spurlock.
Yeah, that was the 1 month show thing, yeah.
Yeah.
This should be a mandatory thing to get elected into office. And I don't think a lot of people would disagree unless you're a Republican or a rich Democrat or whatever you want to do. Right.
Well, I guess we have to define what into office means because there's a lot of government offices. But yeah, if we're talking like, Congress, Senate, President, I could get behind that.
Definitely.
I'd say you try it, but like a mandatory thing is like it should be highly suggested by the voters. But a mandatory thing is getting more votes than the other person. But I would do it. I mean, I've eaten on less over 2 weeks stretches. Like it is, like I would do it, and it is difficult, right? But I don't feel like I feel like it is kind of poverty tourism too. But like, it's just I don't know. We got to get to the real issue, and then that's if you guys both think the minimum wage should be raised, and I don't.
No, look, you raise the minimum wage, you're going to reduce people on government assistance. And
well, I mean, if you raise the minimum wage according to the CBO, then you'll pull 1 million people out of poverty, but you'll cost 500,000 people their jobs. That's in the CBO report.
But we know from historical precedent that is at least questionable at best, because that was the same argument. I saw Robert Wright make this quote just today, and I don't always agree with him, so it was nice to see him say something that seemed a little sensical. But whenever he pushed for a minimum wage increase as a budget advisor back in the day, or secretary, whatever his position was, I forget what it was.
He was the Secretary of Treasury, I believe.
Was he Secretary of Treasury? Okay. People, they said, oh yeah, that's going to cost jobs. It's going to cost jobs. We raised the minimum wage, and we had the largest job increase in a 4-year period in the history of the United States. Now, there are other factors there. The economy did really well at that time. I'm not saying those jobs increased because the minimum wage went up. That may have been a factor. But I think there's a historical precedent to show that at the very least, it doesn't really hurt jobs. And the fact of the matter is that in this same article, goes into some of these details. We're talking about giving, was it $40 million in purchasing power to minimum wage workers in this one state? What state was it? Was it Minnesota?
It was Minnesota.
Minnesota, $40 million of purchasing power in a state like that for the lowest class. And these are people who are working. These aren't people in handouts. They're people trying to play their part and do, their duty. Like, I don't, maybe it's because I'm too Keynesian in my economics, but to me, that seems like a good thing.
No, see, it matches up with the facts. There's historical precedent that shows that there's no negative effect on jobs when you raise the minimum wage to a certain extent.
See, this is where I disagree with you guys, because two things are true two things are true with the minimum wage. One, Walmart, McDonald's, all these big gigantic corporations, they're not going to fire anybody. They already hire as little people as possible and pay them as little as possible. So the minimum wage actually doesn't affect big corporations as much as people say. But small businesses that are on the margins and they don't have the economies of scale, they are affected by the minimum wage, and they are the ones.
Most small businesses pay above the minimum wage anyway.
I'm
No,
saying.
I'm jumping in. I'm jumping in because Sean just lost this argument, and I can't wait to shut you down.
Go.
Go ahead.
We had this. Maybe Sean wasn't here. Oh no, because we didn't have it on camera, Jeff. This was a chat you and I had on Facebook, where you and I kind of got into an argument because I'm for a much smaller minimum wage increase than you are. Because I used to own a small business, so I'm more familiar with these laws. Small businesses don't pay federal minimum wage. They pay state minimum wage. If you make under I believe it was $500,000 a year, you pay the state minimum wage. So in Arkansas, I think that's $650, $625, something like that. So if you're going to say raising the federal minimum wage hurts small businesses, then you don't have a leg to stand on, because businesses under a certain amount are dictated by state laws, and so then it's a state issue, and the states need to look and say, hey, is this going to hurt our small businesses if we raise our state minimum wage? Raising a federal minimum wage affects McDonald's, affects Walmart, doesn't affect mom and pop down the street. And if mom and pop down the street are making over $500,000, they're not mom and pop down the street. I don't want to hear that BS. That's not a small business. You got $500,000 a year coming in. You ain't small.
Well, first of all, we are talking about Minnesota's minimum wage. The story is a Minnesota minimum wage story, but regardless, if you and 500,000 in revenue are we talking revenue or profit? Like, because revenue isn't that much if depending on what your costs are. My point is.
Yeah, no. I've made that same argument when it comes to people griping about farm subsidies. Like, I know farmers who bring in over $1 million a year because they spend $2 million. I would need to look up the specifics. It's been several years since I've owned a business, but if I'm not mistaken, that was adjusted to where your business expenses and costs didn't count. They didn't count in that total.
But my point is look, certain businesses are going to absorb a minimum wage or not absorb a minimum wage increase better than others, right? And obviously, if you have a larger business and you have a larger economy of scale, then you are able to apportion costs better. And a small to medium-sized business would be negatively impacted more than a bigger business. So I get that, like, you want Walmart and you want all these companies to pay a higher wage, but like you're also making the market less competitive for them. So like
but you assume that a minimum wage increase would blanket everyone and there wouldn't be any sort of exceptions carved up for small businesses. That's not necessarily true.
In Australia,
would you be all right with that if they decided to carve out some sort of exemption and say, look, if you're a small business under a certain amount of revenue,
let me jump in, Sean. Hold on, Sean. Let me jump in here.
But in Australia, which I always get like liberal posts on Facebook saying Australia's wage is $15, their minimum wage. They actually do have a smarter minimum wage system. If you're 15, your minimum wage is $5.85 in Australia. It goes up on age because the minimum wage statistically affects younger workers and less skilled workers worse than it does older workers. So like if you had some kind of like graduated system, it would make more sense in my opinion than a blanket wage.
This is what a two-party system is supposed to look like. Like the way Congress is supposed to work is liberals like me and Jeff are supposed to come in and say, hey, we should raise the minimum wage because it gives lower classes more spending power and puts more money into the economy and they cannot die, and that's good. And then conservatives like Sean are supposed to come in and say, well, no, because it might affect small businesses, disproportionately compared to big businesses, yada, yada, yada. And then so we're supposed to get together and say, okay, hey, let's do this, but let's make exceptions for those small businesses you said. And I don't know why I'm using my left hand for the right argument for some reason. But anyway, like that's how Congress is supposed to work. And that's what compromise is, and that's how legislation is supposed to happen. And we're doing that on this show, but we don't get to write the laws. What's happening right now is people I'm going to switch to the correct hands. People on the left are saying we should do this, and people on the right are saying we shouldn't do this, and then they just throw up their hands and quit. And that's pathetic, man. We deserve better than that.
Well, remember all those a lot of those politicians on the right who are arguing against this are bought by big business that would be affected by raising the minimum wage.
But big
So,
business, the ironic thing is, big business would actually benefit more from driving up the wages because they have the economies of scale to
which is why
apportion them.
it's so weird that they're shooting themselves in the foot. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, so you can afford an army of lobbyists to say that no, we're going to fight 100% against raising the minimum wage because it's going to hurt us. But I just spent a few $1,000,000 on this group of lobbyists to go and lobby Congress in order to fight against that.
Well,
It makes no
well,
sense.
the thing is, it wouldn't necessarily help big business so much as hurt smaller business. 'Cause what Sean's getting at, if I understand him right, is like, okay, so you raise the minimum wage, and even if you make the exceptions for small businesses, that exception actually makes big business more attractive for employees. Because if they go work for Walmart, the minimum wage is $10, they get $10. If they work for mom and pop, they're not going to get $10 because mom and pop gets the exemption. So that doesn't help Walmart because Walmart would much rather get that same employee for $8 instead of 10. But it does hurt mom and pop because now their job that they have to offer is a lot less attractive than that $10 Walmart job. So I see what Sean is saying, but at the end of the day, I think the workforce, the people who are looking for jobs compared to the number of people who have jobs, is big enough to where mom and pop are still going to get their employees.
And not only that, mom and pop might actually get more customers because not everybody likes shopping at Walmart.
Hey, Walmart posted a smaller growth this quarter for the fourth quarter in the year. And as an Arkansan, I shouldn't rejoice in that, but there's I say for the fourth consecutive quarter, I should say, they have not grown at a greater rate than they did the previous quarter. So I don't know, maybe the message is getting out there, or maybe it's like the people say, and it just has to do with Walmart restructuring. I don't know.
Right. And we've been over this before, but my plan to deal with Walmart would specifically target companies like Walmart. Like they benefit from food stamps and all those government programs. If I was I am a conservative or libertarian person, but if I was an actual so-called conservative in the government, I would pass a law that says if X number of your employees are paid in such a way that they get food stamps, then you, the company, can't accept food stamps. Like you can either have a subsidized employee wage or subsidized revenue, and like that's the way I would deal with Walmart. Is they can't accept food stamps and pay their employees so little that they all get food stamps. Like you have to choose one, and that would deal with some of the problems in Walmart.
Like I have to argue again. Like the truth is, I kind of like that. I do. I really do. The problem with that though is then you would create why libertarians like you would have a huge issue with that is you would create a whole cottage industry of food stamp grocery stores. Like in smaller towns where Walmart is the only place to shop, you would have it'd be almost like payday lenders. Like there would be little companies that spring up regionally to capitalize on that. And in towns of 10,000 people or less, you'd have food stamp grocery stores because the only other grocery store in town was Walmart. But I think your heart's in the right place. I like the idea.
And you know what? You're sending out actually more solutions than Congress.
But that's totally true that you would create a distortion, but that I'd argue that distortion is already there. Like certain your local fruit stand, right? Because I do a lot of my shopping in less economically healthy neighborhoods. Your local food stands don't take food stamps. It's only your box stores that take them anyway. So to me that distortion is already there because money that isn't being spent in a tiny business that can't qualify for food stamps is being spent at Walmart anyway.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to like and leave a comment below, or even share. Sharing is caring. If you want to see more TYT Nation videos, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYT Nation. Thank you for watching.